Rome, what an amazing city. So the question is, can we do 48 hours in Rome and see all the amazing sights, all the big sights? Carry on watching and let's find out. We travel independently, so we wanted to see if we could organise everything ourselves. This challenge included booking all attractions directly and visiting without arranging any tour guides. So let's have a bit of a look at Rome. Fiumicino Airport is the international airport for Rome. It's out by the coast about 30 kilometres from the city centre. We had a rental car because we're doing a larger trip. It's not something I'd bother doing if I was just visiting Rome. It looks like the trains and the buses going to the city centre are quite a good value from the airport. Taxis, however, are more like €50, and I was quite surprised to find that our hotel's shuttle bus charged around €40 per person. The river Tiber runs roughly north to south along the western side of the historic city centre. The river has a small island with bridges joining either side. Stretching away southeast of this is the historic Circus Maximus, where the chariot racing was held. Think of the film Spartacus. Overlooking the length of the Circus Maximus is the Palatine Hill, the poshest place to live in ancient Roman times, and where Romulus started the city of Rome. The other side of the Palatine Hill, to the northeast, is the Forum, where day-to-day Roman civic life occurred. Politics, meeting friends, religion. The southeastern end of the Forum opens out into the immense Colosseum, the impressive 50,000-seater stadium of Roman times. At the other end of the Forum is the Capitoline Hill and the huge white Victor Emmanuel monument. Completed in the 1930s, there is no hiding this giant building. It towers over everything else. North of the Victor Emmanuel monument are the streets of what used to be the Field of Mars in ancient Roman times. These streets house the Pantheon and have many narrow, winding streets filled with restaurants, shops and bars. At the western end of the Field of Mars, you can cross the Tiber and head to the Vatican City, home to the Pope and St. Peter's Basilica. You may be lucky, turn up, queue, hopefully not for hours, and get in to a major attraction. But this seems increasingly difficult. Booking in advance is probably the safest option for guaranteeing entry, and quick entry at that. You could try booking with a tour guide when you arrive, but again this is a risk. There are definite benefits in booking a tour guide, even though we didn't. Those we overheard seemed very knowledgeable, although again if using them I would consider booking their services in advance. So we decided on a DIY approach. So how to book your attractions if you're doing it yourself? The first challenge is finding the official website of the attraction. This is actually more difficult than it sounds. Every search returns numerous official-looking websites from agencies or travel advice websites that also seem to be fronts for selling tickets. I'll come back to this in more detail later. Buses and metros in Rome are very good. You can buy tickets in advance or pay by tapping a contactless credit card against a reader on the bus. And note that you can't pay with cash on buses. Metro stations have ticket machines, but bus stops appear not to as far as we could see. You can buy tickets from certain shops, for example, tobacconists. Our hotel gift shop also sold tickets. If you buy a ticket, you must validate it as soon as you get on the bus. Now we found that the machines for validating tickets were towards the back of the bus. If you choose to pay with a contactless card, then you'll find the machines towards the front of the bus. A single ticket is valid for 100 minutes of travel, and that includes multiple changes of transport, i.e. each ticket is designed to allow you to complete one journey, albeit you may need to hop on and off of several buses or metro lines to do it. Vatican City, it's the smallest country in the world, and no visit to Rome would be complete without it. At the heart of Vatican City is St. Peter's Basilica, built in the 1500s. It remains the largest church in the world. It is really huge inside. It's built on the site of the tomb of St. Peter, a disciple of Jesus, crucified in Rome in the year 64 AD. I highly recommend visiting St. Peter's Basilica, but because it is free, it is very popular. St. Peter's opens at about 7 AM, so my advice is to go then and then get your breakfast later. The reason for this is security. We queued for 18 minutes at 7 AM on Monday. By early afternoon, the queue stretched around the block. It must have taken hours. Plus, those in the queue got soaked when a thunderstorm and hailstorm descended upon them. Also, pay attention to the dress code. Apparently people do get turned away. Make sure your knees, shoulders, cleavage, all that's covered. In fact, any religious site in Italy will have a dress code, so best to dress modestly when there. So if you want to visit a site, you're not prevented from doing so. If you've walked to the Vatican from the centre of Rome, you'll have crossed the bridge. You'll see that the queue for security is on the right-hand side. Security is pretty much airport style. You'll go through a metal detector and your bag will need to go through an X-ray, so it's certainly worth getting your bits and pieces out of your pocket and sticking them in your bag before you get to security. Once you're past security, if you stay on the ground level, there's a cloakroom and a set of toilets in front of you when you go inside. Although there are cloakrooms on the ground floor, we have 25-litre day rucksacks, backpacks. We were able to go into the main basilica without taking them off or storing them. So as you walk to the basilica, there's a ramp and there's some steps on the left, and those are what will take you to the main entrance at the front of the basilica, so that's where you want to go to actually get in. Because of our early start, it meant we were able to walk around the basilica with maybe a dozen other visitors. It was fantastic. Now we also wanted to climb the dome. To do that you have to exit back out of the front of the basilica, turn right and re-enter the building on the last door, and you can proceed to the end where there's a ticket office. So although entrance to the basilica, being a church, is free, climbing up to the dome you pay for. It's €8 each if you want to use the stairs, or 10 if you want to use the elevator. Although note that the elevator only covers the lower half of the journey up to the main roof, and the steps that surround the elevator are actually quite easy. Once you've bought your tickets, you return back to the main part of the basilica, and the staff there will take you to the elevator or they'll point you in the direction of the steps. Once you reach the main roof level, you walk out in the open until you get to the dome. Once inside the walls of the dome, you have two choices. You can either do the cupola at the top, and when you come down, walk around the inside of the dome. Alternatively, you can decide not to do the cupola and just come off and do the dome on its own. Note that to climb all the way to the cupola, you do need to be slim and you need to be fit. You're climbing in a gap between the outer and the inner walls of the dome. This gets very narrow, and as you rise, starts to cant over at more and more of an angle, so it becomes very awkward. You also really want to do the climb before the tour groups. You don't want to be meeting tour groups coming in the other direction, given that the corridors are really only just wide enough for one person, and the descent is by the same path that you climbed it, so you will run into people coming up the other direction. The interior of the dome has views down, but unfortunately there's a high mesh fence, but it does obscure the view and it makes photography much more difficult. On exiting the basilica, you leave on the right hand side, on the opposite side of the piazza to security. This takes you past the souvenir shop. There's also a post office attached, so that means you can buy your postcards and then buy international stamps from the post office. Outside there are post boxes, so your recipients will receive a postcard with a postmark from the world's smallest country. The Vatican Museum is huge, and it includes the Sistine Chapel, built in the 1400s. The chapel would be of little interest were it not for the interior decoration provided by Botticelli, Raphael, Michelangelo and other artists of the time. I'm not really a museum person. For me, St. Peter's was better. Also, I went to the Vatican Museum really at peak time. If you really want to do the Vatican Museum, go really early, planning to spend a good half a day. It's also probably worth doing a bit of research and deciding what you want to see within the museum. It is a vast museum. And like other religious sites, a dress code applies. Also, selfie sticks and large backpacks are not allowed, but again, our 25-litre backpacks were absolutely fine. So although the Sistine Chapel is physically only a few metres away from the front of St. Peter's Basilica, you can't get to it from that piazza. You have to walk 20 minutes around the north walls of the Vatican to find the entrance. You'll likely see the exit first. The entrance is in a wall behind you. We actually missed it the first time we walked past. We booked our tickets in advance. It was a timed slot and it cost us €17 per ticket. They open up slots for booking 2 months in advance. You have to get in pretty early in the day before they sell out. I made a bit of a mistake on this and got the day wrong, so when I came to book I was a day late. The only time slots available was 2:30 PM, which is a pretty busy time. It's technically a time slot, but we actually arrived an hour early. But security outside didn't seem to care. They scanned the booking confirmation I had printed and they just let us through. Inside is a big, bustling modern hall. To the left there are cash desks, but since we had vouchers we could go straight up the stairs. Like many other attractions, there are always a lot of people milling around. It's easy to assume they're in a queue and that you've got to stand behind them, but often they're just waiting, so you can often just squeeze right past them, which is what we did. At the top of the stairs we turned right and there were automated machines to print our tickets. They were fairly easy to use, but there were also staff on hand to help. If you've booked in advance and you've got a voucher that you've printed out, that's not going to get you directly through the turnstiles in the museum. You've got to go to one of these kiosks or to one of the automated machines to convert that into actual tickets. But the ticket machines were actually very easy to use. You could just select a language, you hold the 2D barcode on your voucher up to the scanner and it just spits out your tickets. You then take the tickets up to the barriers where you place the barcode on the scanner window and a green arrow indicates that you can push through the turnstile. You're then through and into the actual museum, where an escalator can take you up to the main level, although there's also a nice spiral ramp with models of ships that go the same way and most people seem to bypass. The museum was extremely busy with tour groups when we went, which was in early afternoon, and I suspect most of these crowds are mainly focused on going to and from the Sistine Chapel, which is at the far end of the museum complex. When we went to parts of the museum that were not on that route, they were much quieter. If you do find yourself surrounded by crowds in tour groups, then either hang back or squeeze past. You can often find yourself in clear space. I guess the tour groups tend to end up bunching together a bit like buses. The paintings on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel are amazing, but it's sort of ruined because it's so crowded and noisy there, despite staff trying to quieten people down. They also don't want you taking pictures or videos. Nearly 2,000 years old, the concrete, brick and limestone Colosseum is still a magnificent structure, despite suffering from fire, earthquakes and locals robbing much of its stone. We wanted to visit the underground of the Colosseum, underneath the arena where gladiators and animals were once held. Once you found the official website, the full experience underground ticket at €22 plus a €2 booking fee is actually a good deal. To compare, here is a similar ticket price from a tour guide, but bear in mind you will get a professional guide taking you around. Apart from the price, the great thing about this ticket is what is included. You get priority entry into the Colosseum and a tour through the underground part. You get to visit the arena and the other areas of the Colosseum, such as the museum exhibits. Then you can tour the Forum and the Palatine Hill opposite. Finally, within the last two, you get to visit 7 what they call super sites. I'll cover these shortly and why they're such a good value. Colosseum tickets seem to go on sale around 4 weeks in advance. If you want to book the underground tour, you need to watch the website in run up to this to ensure you can jump on the tickets the minute they become available, because they sell out in minutes. You must book a time slot for the underground tour, and I recommend getting the first tickets for 9:15 AM. We timed our metro ride to arrive opposite the Colosseum at 8 AM, so we could get some photos before the crowds arrived and have breakfast sat outside the cafe opposite. Tickets are not transferable, so make sure you bring ID with you to prove you are the rightful ticket owners. They do check. With your timed tickets, you enter the Colosseum on the Forum side. Plan to get there at least 15 minutes before the entrance time. The instructions provided refer to an entrance name that doesn't seem to appear on the actual entrance, so it's not that clear. With these tickets, at least at the 9 AM we arrived in late March, we found only a very small queue. Signs near the entrance say you cannot take a backpack in. We and others on the tour had day packs of about 25 litres, and we were allowed in through security with them. If doing the underground tour and not escorted, you can apparently download an audio app to listen to on your phone. I wasn't aware of this beforehand. It's probably a good idea because there were almost no interpretive signboards to study, just numbers that reference the audio guide. The representative from the Colosseum who escorts you down to the underground area is not actually a guide, and they will not talk you through the site. So without a tour guide or an audio guide, you're pretty clueless about what is what underground. After the underground portion of the tour, you're left to visit the rest of the site in your own time. There are some interesting museum exhibits and information, but we found the rest of the site to be pretty crowded in comparison to the small group underground tours. I didn't find any toilets in the actual Colosseum, and outside the Colosseum, the only toilets I noticed in the area were of limited quality on the east side of the Colosseum. They needed a €1 coin, so make sure you carry euro coins. It's a turnstile machine, so they're not going to take smaller coins or give you change. Having said that, if you are then going to the Forum/Palatine Hill immediately afterwards, there are multiple toilets in that area. The Forum was the civic centre in Roman times. Adjacent to the Forum and looking down on it is the Palatine Hill, initially covered with villas of the wealthy and later palaces of rulers such as Augustus. The full experience ticket provides entry to both sites, which are adjoined. Apart from a hillside, there's no barrier between the two. You can visit these either the same day as you do the Colosseum or the next day, although it seemed to me to make sense to do them on the same day because you're in the area. After leaving the Colosseum, the nearest entrance to the Forum is directly opposite. If you have the full experience ticket and you see a big queue at the Forum entrance, walk to the front of the queue and check out which of the two lanes they are queuing for, as you could queue for ages before discovering you're in the wrong lane. We found that the big queue was actually for those being escorted by tour guides. We could squeeze to the right of this big queue to find a separate line, which was just for those like us who had individual tickets. There was pretty much no queue in this line. Note that like with the Colosseum, you do need to go through metal detectors again. After security, the Forum is ahead and to the right. The Palatine Hill is to the left. Once inside, you can move freely between the two of them. It's a large area with a lot to see. As well as letting you into the Forum and the Palatine Hill, the full experience ticket also allows you into 7 super sites within these areas. These are some interesting individual sites. There are attendants checking tickets at the entrance to each of these sites, and it seems the guided tours don't go there. So the super sites are very peaceful and can be quite interesting. Definitely seek out some of them if you have a ticket that includes them. If you intend to exit out of the north end of the Forum, towards the Capitoline Hill, you can find a tunnel that goes under the road to an extra part of the site, below Trajan's Market. And upon exiting, you'll come across the huge 19th century edifice of the Victor Emmanuel Memorial. Directly north of the Piazza Venezia, containing the Pantheon and the Trevi Fountain, is what you could consider Rome's historic heart. if you exclude the ancient Roman areas I've already described. This is the area that used to be the Field of Mars in ancient Roman times. This is where you come to eat, drink, shop, and it itself contains many historic buildings and monuments. The Pantheon. At nearly 2,000 years old, it has a 4,500 ton concrete dome, so advanced in material technology that it is still the world's largest non-reinforced concrete dome. We visited at about 9 AM and it was pretty quiet. There was no queuing to get in. Later in the day, the piazza in front of the Pantheon was packed with people. I didn't check the Pantheon itself, but I imagine it must have been busy. If you visit in the week, the Pantheon is free. It's considered a church. If you go at the weekend, you have to book an audio guide at €8.50. Heading south from the Victor Emmanuel monument, you pass Michelangelo's Piazza del Campidoglio. This is up on the historic Palatine hill. From there we headed down towards the river, crossing the Tiber to Trastevere, a really cool area for shopping, dining and drinking. I've travelled the world, but this was the first time visiting Rome. The weather in late March was perfect for us. Around 18 Celsius in the afternoons, much warmer than Britain, but cool enough for doing a lot of walking. If you do decide to go, I hope you have a fantastic time in Rome. We did. If you want to see the wider area, I'll be putting together a video covering what we learnt travelling around Tuscany. So Rome was fantastic. I had preconceptions. I was really surprised by Rome. I thought it was going to be dirty. I thought it was going to be full of traffic, blaring horns, etc. But actually it's fantastic. The centre of Rome is the historic centre, is virtually pedestrianised. It's just so easy to get around. It's a wonderful city. So I really recommend going. If you're going there, have a fantastic time. Okay, see you guys.